AITA for cutting ties with my father despite his dementia? My name is Ileana, and I'm 49 years old. My father, Kingsley, is 83. He lives in the same city as me, while my two sisters, Callie and Juliana, live far away in another country. Because of that distance, most of the responsibility for him has always fallen on me, whether I wanted it or not. Growing up, my father controlled every part of my life. It wasn't the kind of control that came from love or concern. It came from pride and ego. He decided what clothes I wore, what friends I was allowed to have, and even what foods I was permitted to eat. At school, I was bullied constantly for wearing outdated, awkward clothing that Kingsley insisted on buying for me. He said they were modest and appropriate, but really, they just made me stand out in the worst way. Whenever I cried to him about being teased, he would sneer and say, "You should be grateful I care about you. Those other kids are just jealous." Whenever I tried to push back, the punishment was silence or yelling. If I dared to question him, he'd scream at me until I was shaking, or he'd refuse to speak to me for days, letting me sit in guilt and fear. There was no winning with him. If I obeyed, he'd still find fault. If I disobeyed, he'd make me pay for it emotionally. As I grew older, I began to realize Kingsley wasn't just strict. He was deeply manipulative. He twisted stories, exaggerated events, and lied so smoothly that even outsiders believed him. To the rest of the world, he was charming. He had this way of making strangers adore him. But behind closed doors, that charm vanished, and he became someone cruel, stubborn, and impossible to please. When I finally moved out at 19, I swore I would never live under his shadow again. I promised myself I'd keep my distance, and for years, I kept that promise. I only saw him at family gatherings or on rare occasions when it was absolutely unavoidable. My sisters were luckier. Since they lived so far away, they didn't have to experience Kingsley's manipulations in the same way I did. Everything changed 3 years ago. Kingsley was struck by a cyclist one morning while crossing the street. It wasn't a major accident, but at his age, it left him shaken and in the hospital for weeks. Because Callie and Juliana couldn't fly in immediately, all of the responsibility fell on me. I visited him every single day. I talked to doctors, managed his medications, and made sure he had everything he needed. During that time, I also went to his tiny apartment. It was a mess, cluttered, unsafe, with broken furniture that could have caused him to fall. I spent hours cleaning it, throwing out the worst of it, and even bought him new furniture and safety items with my own money. I wanted to give him a safe space to recover. As the weeks went by, I noticed something that worried me more than his physical injuries. Kingsley seemed off. He was forgetful, easily agitated, and sometimes didn't seem to know what day it was. He would repeat the same story over and over, sometimes within the same conversation. Other times, he would mix up details in ways that didn't make sense. I spoke to my mother, Anna, about it. Even though she divorced Kingsley years ago, she still checked on him occasionally. Anna agreed that something seemed wrong. I also brought it up with Callie and Juliana during a video call. They both said they trusted my judgment and agreed we needed to think about his future. We all came to the conclusion that Kingsley shouldn't be driving or living alone anymore. It was clear he needed more care than he could give himself. So, I began the exhausting process of researching assisted living facilities. Since Kingsley had very little savings, my sisters and I agreed to split the costs so he could live somewhere comfortable. For months, I toured different places, filled out endless forms, and spoke to staff about his condition. It was stressful and time-consuming, but I wanted to do what was best for him. I finally found a facility I thought he would like. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe, clean, and the staff seemed genuinely kind. I even arranged a moving date and started making plans to get him settled. At the very last minute, everything fell apart. Kingsley refused to go. He said we were trying to lock him up and take away his freedom. He shouted at me, accusing me of plotting against him. "You think you can control me, Ileana," he yelled. "I'm not some prisoner you can dump in a home." No matter how much I tried to explain that it was for his safety, he wouldn't listen. I was exhausted and heartbroken. The next big issue was his driving. He had already been getting lost while driving, and one of his neighbors told me he had nearly hit a pedestrian a few weeks earlier. I knew I had to take action before something terrible happened. I pushed for a medical evaluation, and thankfully, the doctor agreed that Kingsley was no longer safe to drive. His license was officially revoked. At first, Kingsley seemed to understand. He even helped me move his car to my Aunt Margot's garage so it wouldn't tempt him. I thought we had avoided a disaster. But a week later, he completely flipped the story. He called the police and accused me of stealing his car. When 2 officers showed up at his apartment, I was stunned. Luckily, I had all the paperwork from the doctor and proof of what had happened. The police sided with me, but Kingsley didn't care. In his mind, I had betrayed him. He started telling anyone who would listen that I was a terrible daughter. According to him, I had destroyed his life by taking his car and trying to force him into a home. Anna helped when she could, but most of the caregiving still fell on me. Kingsley's moods were unpredictable. Some days, he would beg me to take him grocery shopping or help him run errands. Other days, he would scream at me the moment I walked through the door, accusing me of being part of some grand conspiracy against him. It was impossible to tell where the dementia ended and his natural cruelty began. I would go home from visits nights shaking, sometimes crying. Derek, my husband, would hold me and tell me I was doing the right thing, but deep down, I felt like I was drowning. My sisters were supportive over the phone, but because they lived so far away, they didn't truly understand the toll it was taking on me. They would say things like, "We appreciate you so much, Ileana," but they weren't the ones facing the daily yelling, the constant manipulation, the neighbors giving me judgmental looks because of Kingsley's lies. The breaking point came one evening when I went to drop off some groceries for him. As soon as I walked in, he started shouting that I had stolen his independence, that I was jealous of him, that I wanted him to suffer. He threw a glass across the room, narrowly missing my head. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't even pick up my purse at first. I left without saying a word. That night, I sat in my car and sobbed. I realized that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. Kingsley didn't see me as a daughter trying to help. He saw me as an enemy. The next morning, I called my sisters and told them I couldn't do it anymore. I would still quietly check up on him by talking to his neighbors and making sure he was safe, but I would no longer visit him directly or engage with him. Callie was understanding. Juliana was quieter, clearly struggling with guilt, but she eventually agreed that my mental health mattered too. Since then, I've stuck to my decision. I still check with his neighbors, and if there's an emergency, I make sure someone helps him, but I don't speak to him. It started late one Thursday night when my phone rang. It was my sister Callie, and her voice was trembling as soon as I answered. "Ileana, what the hell is going on with Dad?" she blurted out before I could even say hello. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. "What do you mean? What happened?" "Dad just called me," she said, her voice breaking. "He was crying. Ileana, he said you've completely abandoned him, that he hasn't eaten in days, and that you took all his money. He said he doesn't even have money to buy groceries." For a second, I couldn't speak. That's not true," I said finally, my throat tightening. "Callie, you know I've been checking on him through his neighbors. Mrs. Florence brings him meals twice a week, and one of the other neighbors takes him shopping. He's fine. He's lying to you." There was a pause. Then Callie said quietly, "He sounded so convincing, Ileana. He said you've been plotting against him, trying to take control of everything." And then her voice wavered. "Then he sent me screenshots." My blood went cold. "Screenshots? Of what?" Callie sent them to me while we were still on the phone. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. When the images opened, I thought I might vomit. They were fake bank statements, crudely edited, but just convincing enough to fool someone who didn't know better. The statements showed several large transfers, thousands of dollars, supposedly sent from my father's account to mine. "He made these up," I whispered, barely able to breathe. "Callie, I swear on everything I love, these are fake. I have never touched his account." Callie hesitated. "I believe you," she said finally, but her tone wasn't completely certain. "But Juliana's not so sure. She's really upset. She thinks maybe there's some truth to what Dad's saying." The next day, I received a long, scathing email from Juliana. In it, she accused me of being controlling, just like Dad always claimed. "Ileana, you've always been the one to make decisions for everyone. Maybe you didn't realize it, but you treat us like kids and Dad like a burden. Now he's saying you've taken his money and power away, and honestly, it sounds like something you'd do. I'm coming to visit in a few weeks so I can see for myself what's going on." I read the email 3 times, shaking with anger and grief. Juliana had no idea what I'd been dealing with. She hadn't been here to hear him screaming in my face or watch him throw things at me. 2 days later, things got worse. Kingsley went on Facebook, posting a long, dramatic rant about how a certain daughter had stolen from her own father and left him to rot. He didn't name me, but everyone knew who he meant. The post blew up. Family friends started messaging me, some offering support, others furious and accusing me of being a horrible daughter. Even old neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years were weighing in. It felt like my entire reputation was being ripped apart in public. Derek wanted me to post my side of the story, but I refused. Kingsley wanted a public fight, and I wasn't going to give him one. But privately, I was falling apart. Out of sheer desperation, I went to see Aunt Margot, who had been one of the only calm, neutral voices throughout this whole mess. She listened quietly while I poured out everything. The fake screenshots, Juliana's email, Kingsley's Facebook attack. When I was done, she sighed heavily. "Ileana, he's spiraling," she said. "The dementia is definitely worse, but don't underestimate him. Your father has always been manipulative. Now he's using the dementia as a cover to destroy you while playing the victim." "But what do I do?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. Callie believes me, but Juliana doesn't. "Dad is poisoning everyone against me." Margot tapped her chin thoughtfully. "You need to confront this head on. Arrange a 3-way video call with your sisters. Lay everything out in the open so they can see for themselves how erratic he's become." The call was set up for that weekend. Derek sat next to me, holding my hand tightly under the table as I logged in. At first, it went okay. I explained everything calmly. The caregiving I'd done, the doctor's report, how I'd checked on Dad through neighbors. Callie nodded along, clearly supportive. Juliana, however, sat with her arms crossed, her face tight with anger. "Ileana," she snapped, "you always make yourself out to be the hero. But Dad says you've been trying to control his entire life. Maybe you don't even realize how much power you take from people." Before I could respond, chaos erupted. Suddenly, Kingsley barged into the background of Callie's screen, shouting at the top of his lungs. Liar. She's a liar. Don't believe her. He waved a crumpled piece of paper in the air, another fake bank statement, and screamed, she stole everything. She wants me dead. Juliana burst into tears. Callie tried to calm him down, shouting, Dad, stop. You're scaring everyone. Meanwhile, Kingsley turned his fury on me. You're nothing but a snake. Ileana, you ruined my life. You're a disgrace to this family. Derek grabbed the laptop and shut it quickly before I had a panic attack. When the call ended, I collapsed on the couch, shaking uncontrollably. In that moment, it hit me like a brick. There was no winning. No matter how much I did for him, he would twist it into betrayal. Later that night, Callie called me privately. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice thick with tears. I believe you, Ileana. I saw the way he acted. That wasn't just dementia. That was pure manipulation. Juliana, however, sent a single text. I don't know what to think anymore. 2 weeks later, Anna, our mom, called me with shocking news. Kingsley had finally agreed to move into an assisted living facility, but it wasn't the safe, comfortable one I had spent months arranging. Instead, Callie had found a cheaper, less reputable place online. Kingsley told everyone he had chosen it himself, but I knew the truth. Callie pushed him into it after seeing how unstable he'd become. He moved in the following week, still furious with me. Apparently, he tells anyone who will listen that his evil daughter tried to destroy him, that he bravely escaped my clutches. I haven't spoken to him since that disastrous video call. You are not the AITA here, and I'll explain why, but I'll also explore where people might think you are and why that doesn't hold up under scrutiny. First, let's address the core dynamic, caregiving. What you've been doing is unpaid labor that consumes time, energy, and emotional well-being. Society often romanticizes filial duty, but the reality is that caring for an abusive parent with dementia is not the same as caring for a loving parent who gradually declines. Kingsley has a long history of manipulation, emotional abuse, and cruelty. Dementia amplifies those behaviors, but it doesn't erase his track record. You didn't step into this role because of genuine affection or because you wanted to. You stepped in because geography and guilt left you no alternative. That already sets you apart from someone who abandons a parent out of laziness or selfishness. Second, the accusations. Fake bank statements, public rants, and weaponized charm all follow a pattern of control. When people fabricate evidence to smear someone, it's not a misunderstanding, it's character assassination. Dementia explains some of the paranoia and disorientation, but the deliberate effort to twist your reputation, enlist outsiders, and fracture your sibling relationships mirrors the same tactics he used when you were a child. This is important. Dementia may make someone unpredictable, but it doesn't invent cruelty where it never existed. His lies are believable precisely because he has practiced them for decades. That means you're not just fighting a disease, you're battling an entire history of manipulation. Third, the sibling conflict. Callie sees your truth because she watched the meltdown in real time. Juliana, on the other hand, is falling into the trap of distance distortion. When you're far away, it's easy to imagine that the local caregiver exaggerates or controls the narrative. This is classic in families dealing with difficult elders. The distant siblings think they're unbiased, but really, they're shielded from the ugliest parts. They hear the edited version delivered by the parent, not the raw reality you've lived. You're carrying the weight, while they second guess without scars to show for it. Fourth, your response. Some might argue that by stepping back, you're the AITA. But here's where perspective matters. Boundaries are not abandonment. Refusing to be screamed at, physically endangered, or publicly slandered doesn't make you cruel. It makes you human. Caregiving without boundaries turns into martyrdom, and martyrdom helps no one. Not the parent, not the caregiver, not the extended family. By choosing to step back while still ensuring neighbors keep an eye out, you've struck a balance between compassion and self-preservation. That's not AITA behavior. That's survival. Now, my personal suggestion, stop explaining yourself to Kingsley because he thrives on that tension. Redirect your energy into documentation. Keep records, medical notes, neighbor statements, even your sister's acknowledgments of his instability. This isn't just about reputation, it's protection. If he escalates again with lies about money or abuse, you'll need that paper trail. Also, don't try to win Juliana's approval. She has to see the truth for herself, and forcing the issue will only make her dig in deeper. Let the evidence and Kingsley's behavior speak louder than your words. Here's my final judgment. You are not the AITA. You would only drift into AITA territory if you cut every line of responsibility and ignored legitimate emergencies. But you haven't done that. You've created a boundary while leaving safety nets in place. Kingsley's suffering is real, but so is yours, and one does not cancel the other. Choosing to protect your mental health is not selfish. It's necessary. The real tragedy is that dementia has turned an already toxic man into an even more destructive force, and you're the lightning rod for his storm. The only way forward is distance, clarity, and letting go of the fantasy that he will ever ever validate your sacrifices. Before we jump into the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know your favorite part in the comments.
AITA for refusing to take over my sister's bills after she quit her job. My name is Valeria, and I'm 25 years old. I live with my parents and my younger sister, Zora, in a small, aging house on the edge of our town. The house has always felt cramped, especially since tensions in our family have been building for years. What was once a warm and loving home now feels like a storm waiting to break. My parents both have serious health problems. My dad, Riley, has a heart condition that limits what he can do. Even walking too far or climbing the stairs leaves him breathless and pale. My mom has severe arthritis that makes it almost impossible for her to stand or walk for long periods. Some days, she struggles just to get out of bed, and I've watched her fight tears while trying to make dinner or fold laundry. Because of their health, neither of them can work. For the past 2 years, they've been stuck in a frustrating cycle of paperwork and phone calls, trying to get approved for disability benefits that always seem just out of reach. In the meantime, I've been the one holding everything together. I work full-time and cover most of the house expenses. Groceries, internet, utilities, those have all been on me while I wait for some kind of relief to come. It hasn't been easy. There have been months where I've had to skip anything fun, even basic things like getting a haircut or replacing my worn-out shoes, just to make sure my family has food and electricity. The only reason I've been able to manage it all is because of my younger sister, Zora. She's 21 and had a part-time job at a small retail store nearby. Even though she wasn't contributing as much as me, her paycheck made a huge difference. It took some of the weight off my shoulders, and for that, I was quietly grateful. Zora and I aren't close. In fact, we haven't spoken directly in almost a year after a fight so intense it left cracks in our relationship. Now, we pass each other in the hallways like strangers, offering nothing but glares or cold silence. Still, as long as she kept paying her part of the bills, I tried to let it go. Then, a month ago, everything shifted, and not for the better. It was a rainy evening, the kind where the whole house feels damp and heavy. I had just come home from work, tired and starving, when I heard the front door slam so hard it rattled the picture frames on the wall. Zora stormed in, her face flushed with anger, and stomped straight to her room without saying a word to me or our parents. A moment later, there was another loud slam as her bedroom door shut. I stood in the hallway, confused and a little alarmed, listening to muffled voices through the thin walls. Then I heard Zora's sharp voice from behind her door. "I'm done. I quit. I'm not working there another day. I'm tired of being treated like trash. I'll find something better, something that actually respects me." My stomach dropped. I didn't say anything right away, hoping maybe I'd misheard, but a few minutes later I knocked lightly on her door, trying to be civil. "Zora, did you just say you quit your job?" There was a pause, and then her irritated voice came back, muffled through the wood. "It's none of your business, Valeria. Leave me alone." The next day, my parents asked me to sit down in the kitchen after dinner. I knew from the serious looks on their faces that it wasn't going to be good news. My mom's hands trembled as she folded them on the table. "Valeria," she said softly, her voice tired and pleading, "your sister's going through a tough time right now. She quit her job because it was a toxic environment. Until she finds another job, we need you to cover her part of the bills." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Mom, I'm already paying for most of the groceries, the internet, and half the utilities," I said, my voice rising with panic. "I can't afford to cover everything. I'll drown." My dad sighed heavily, looking older than his years. "If we don't pay on time, they'll shut off the water or the electricity," he said quietly. "You're the only one with a steady income right now." My throat tightened as I stared at both of them. "So I'm just supposed to take over all the bills because Zora quit without a plan? She doesn't even talk to me. She hasn't spoken a single kind word to me in almost a year, and now you want me to bail her out." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "Please, honey, it's only temporary. Just until she finds another job. I know it's a lot to ask, but we're scared. We can't afford to fall behind." I wanted to help my parents. I always have, but deep down, I knew this wouldn't be temporary. Zora has always been stubborn and irresponsible. Once she realized I was paying for everything, she'd have no reason to rush back to work. I shook my head firmly. "No, I'm sorry, but no. I've been breaking my back to keep this family afloat for 2 years. I can't take on even more because she decided to walk away from her responsibilities." Their faces fell as if I had stabbed them. My dad muttered something something under his breath about me being selfish, and my mom turned away, refusing to speak to me for the rest of the night. I went to bed feeling sick, my chest tight with guilt and anger. Since then, the atmosphere in the house has been unbearable. My parents keep dropping hints about the bills, like casually mentioning how expensive groceries are or how scary it would be to have the water shut off. They don't outright ask again, but the implication is always there, hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Zora avoids me completely, slipping out of the house when I'm around or shutting her door whenever she hears my footsteps. The tension finally boiled over last week when the electric bill came in the mail. I saw the envelope sitting on the counter, and my heart sank. I knew there wouldn't be enough money to cover it unless someone stepped up. When I brought it to my mom, she just sighed, her shoulders sagging. "We'll figure it out," she said weakly, which I knew meant she expected me to cave. I didn't cave. Instead, I walked back to my room and sat on my bed, shaking with frustration. Every part of me wanted to scream at Zora, to demand that she face what she'd done. But I didn't. I stayed silent because I knew it would only make things worse. Then, 2 nights ago, something happened that made everything even more complicated. I was sitting in the living room, trying to read, when Zora walked past me without a word and headed toward the front door. As she left, my mom called out, "Be safe, sweetheart," in the warm, affectionate tone she hasn't used with me in months. That small moment broke me. My parents were bending over backward to comfort Zora while treating me like the enemy simply because I refused to bankrupt myself for her choices. I confronted my mom about it after Zora left. "Why do you keep babying her?" I asked, my voice shaking. "She's an adult, Mom. She quit her job. She refuses to help. And yet you treat her like she's the victim while I'm the bad guy." Mom's eyes filled with tears again. "You don't understand," she said softly. "Zora has always been fragile. She doesn't handle stress well. If we push her too hard, she'll break." I stared at her, stunned. "So you'd rather let me break instead?" She didn't answer. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all the sacrifices I've made over the past 2 years, working overtime, skipping meals, giving up any semblance of a social life, while Zora lounged around, protected from consequences. I thought about how my parents used to praise me for being responsible, but now they just take me for granted. This morning, I woke up to the sound of my parents arguing in the kitchen. Their voices were low but intense, and I caught bits and pieces. "We can't keep this up. Valeria won't budge. Zora needs time." When I walked in, they fell silent. My dad gave me a weary look, and my mom forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The silence was louder than shouting. As of now, the electric bill is due in just a few days. If it isn't paid, the power will be shut off. I've decided I'll pay only my portion, nothing more. But the fear of living in a dark, cold house is eating me alive. I keep wondering if maybe I am being selfish, even though my rational mind knows I'm not. I don't know what will happen next. 2 weeks after that tense conversation, the situation didn't just get worse. It completely exploded in ways I never could have imagined. It started with a sinking feeling in my gut. I had just come home from a long, exhausting shift at work. My legs ached, my head throbbed, and all I wanted to do was take a hot shower and crawl into bed. But as soon as I opened the front door, I knew something was wrong. The house was silent, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of silence. It was the heavy, suffocating kind that made my skin crawl. I found my parents sitting rigidly on the couch. My mom's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying for hours. My dad, Riley, was gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles were white. Standing across the room, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, was Zora. She didn't look sad or scared. She looked smug, almost defiant, like she was ready for battle. Riley's voice was clipped and sharp when he spoke. "Valeria, we need to talk. Now." My stomach twisted into knots. "What happened?" He glared at me, his voice rising. "I got a message from our landlord today. He said the last rent payment didn't go through." I froze. "What? That can't be right. I paid my half. I have the receipt." Mom's voice trembled as she cut in. "Your sister was supposed to pay the other half. She told us she had it covered." Zora rolled her eyes, scoffing like I was the ridiculous one. "I thought Valeria would step up since she has a real job. Why should I empty my savings when she has plenty of money to cover it?" Her words hit me like a slap. "You what?" I shouted, my voice breaking. "Zora, you quit your job. You haven't even been looking for work." She crossed her arms tighter, her chin jutting out defiantly. "That's not your business," she snapped. "You think you're better than me just because you have a paycheck and some boring office job." That was it, I snapped. All the resentment, all the bottled up frustration came pouring out. "This isn't about being better than you," I screamed. "This is about responsibility, Zora. You don't get to sit around all day, doing nothing, while I work myself into the ground to keep this house running. You're an adult, and you need to start acting like one." Mom started crying then, her sobs filling the room. She pleaded with us to calm down, but neither of us listened. My dad was shouting now too, too, his voice booming as he demanded the truth from Zora. She just screamed back, blaming everyone but herself. The fight escalated until Zora finally stormed into her room, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall and shattered on the floor. I was shaking, my chest heaving as I stared at my parents. My dad sank into the couch, looking utterly defeated, while my mom buried her face in her hands. That night, I lay awake for hours, replaying the argument in my head. My heart ached, but I still had no idea how bad things were about to get. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Dozens of missed calls, unread texts, and Facebook notifications lit up my screen. Confused and groggy, I scrolled through them, and my stomach dropped. Friends, extended family, even a few coworkers were messaging me, asking if it was true that I had abandoned my sick parents to suffer while I hoarded money for myself. Some messages were harsh, calling me cold-hearted and selfish. Panic surged through me. I opened Facebook and immediately felt like I was going to vomit. There, at the top of my feed, was Zora's post. It was a long, dramatic status accusing me of refusing to help our parents while they struggle to survive. She painted herself as the devoted daughter, claiming she had been doing everything she could while I supposedly lived like a queen, refusing to lift a finger. She didn't mention that she had quit her job. She didn't mention the months I'd spent paying nearly every bill. She didn't mention the endless sacrifices I'd made for this family. The comments were full of sympathy for her. "You deserve better, Zora. Wow, I can't believe Valeria would do that to you. Some people are just heartless." I felt my throat close up. My reputation, everything I'd built, was crumbling because of her lies. Hands shaking, I texted her, "Valeria, why would you post that? You know it's not true. Zora, maybe now you'll understand how it feels to be treated like nothing." I wanted to throw my phone against the wall. Instead, I forced myself to breathe and think rationally. If she was going to lie publicly, then I would tell the truth. I sent a group message to my aunts, uncles, and close friends. I explained everything, every bill I'd paid, every sacrifice I'd made. I even included screenshots of my pay stubs and bank transfers to prove it. Some relatives messaged me back immediately, offering support and apologies. Others were colder, saying things like, "We don't want to take sides." Meanwhile, my parents stayed completely silent. They didn't defend me publicly or privately. That silence hurt worse than anything else. A week later, things hit rock bottom. The electric company sent a final warning. If the full balance wasn't paid in 3 days, they would shut off our power. I sat my parents down at the kitchen table, my voice shaking but firm. "I will pay my portion, but I will not cover Zora's. If you keep enabling her, this will never stop." My mom broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, while my dad just looked exhausted. "I don't know what to do anymore," he whispered, staring at the table like it might have the answers. 2 nights later, chaos erupted. I woke to shouting loud, vicious yelling that sent me bolting upright in bed. My heart pounded as I ran to the living room. Zora and Riley were in each other's faces, screaming so loudly the neighbors probably heard. My dad was holding a printed notice from the electric company, waving it like a weapon. "You lied to us, Zora," he roared. "You said you were looking for work, but you've been sitting around all day, doing nothing, while Valeria works herself to death to keep this family afloat." Zora screamed back, her face red and streaked with tears. "Maybe if you treated me like a real daughter instead of worshipping Valeria, I wouldn't feel this way. You've always loved her more than me." Her words hung in the air like poison. The fight was brutal. Years of resentment spilled out, accusations, old wounds, bitter truths no one wanted to admit. My mom was sobbing, begging them to stop, while I stood frozen, feeling like the ground beneath us was breaking apart. Finally, my dad's voice cut through the chaos, trembling with rage. "Until you find a job and start paying your share, you're not welcome in this house." Zora's eyes went wide with shock, then narrowed into a glare. "Fine," she spat. "You'll regret this." She grabbed a backpack, stuffed a few things into it, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the whole house shook. It's been a week since Zora left. The house is quieter now, but it's a heavy, hollow kind of quiet. The bills are finally under control because I know exactly what I'm responsible for, but my relationship with my parents is fractured. They've started to realize how unfair they were to me, and my mom even apologized through tears, saying she let guilt cloud her judgment. But the damage lingers. There are moments when I catch my dad staring at the door, as if waiting for Zora to come back. My mom cries at night when she thinks I can't hear. As for Zora, she hasn't contacted us directly. The last I saw, she was posting cryptic messages on Facebook about fake families and starting over somewhere new. Some of her friends keep commenting supportive things, fanning the flames of her resentment. I don't know if we'll ever reconcile, but for now, the lights are on, the house is warm, and I can finally breathe without feeling like I'm drowning. Still, every time the wind rattles the windows at night. I wonder if one day Zora will come back, not to apologize, but to destroy what little peace we've managed to rebuild.
First, the foundation. You stepped into the role of provider when both of your parents' health declined and left them unable to work. Covering groceries, internet, and utilities while holding a full-time job is already an enormous load. That load became heavier when Zora quit her part-time work, erased her contribution, and then deflected responsibility onto you. This wasn't a case of unavoidable hardship. It was a conscious decision on her part to leave without a plan and then rely on others to fill the gap. That's not just reckless, it's parasitic. Second, the enabling dynamic. Your parents, already weighed down by illness and desperation, asked you to stretch yourself thinner for the sake of keeping the peace. That's a common trap in families. The responsible child gets cast as the problem when they refuse to sacrifice even more, while the irresponsible child is coddled under the guise of fragility. But fragility doesn't excuse manipulation. Zora didn't just quit her job. She weaponized sympathy, painted herself as a victim, and even twisted the narrative publicly on social media to gain validation from outsiders. That's not fragility. That's calculated deflection. Third, your refusal. Some would argue that by refusing to cover Zora's portion, you jeopardized your parents' comfort. But let's be clear. The bills were already unsustainable because Zora chose not to fulfill her role. You refusing to bail her out wasn't creating the problem. It was exposing it. Boundaries are not cruelty. They're the only tool you had to stop being drowned by someone else's avoidance. You didn't abandon your parents. You continued to pay your share, and you were transparent about your limits. That is responsible behavior, not selfishness. Fourth, the escalation. Zora didn't just sulk quietly. She lashed out publicly, framing you as a villain while conveniently erasing your sacrifices. Her Facebook post wasn't an expression of pain. It was a smear campaign. The moment someone takes private family struggles and twists them into lies for an audience, they reveal more about themselves than about the person they're targeting. That's a betrayal, and no amount of sibling rivalry softens the blow. My personal insight: your parents' silence when Zora defamed you online is telling. It hurt more than Zora's lies because silence from those who know the truth feels like abandonment. Their later recognition of your burden shows they're beginning to see clearly, but the damage of their earlier passivity will take time to heal. My suggestion is this: continue paying only your portion and put everything in writing. Track what you cover, keep receipts, and protect yourself. That way, if accusations rise again, you have undeniable proof. As for Zora, don't chase reconciliation. Let her learn. Life outside the safety net often forces growth faster than coddling ever could. Now, some humor to lighten this storm. Zora quitting her job and expecting you to pick up the slack is like someone jumping out of a lifeboat, poking holes in it, and then shouting at you to row harder while they sunbathe. At some point, the only reasonable response is to let them swim on their own. Final judgment: you are not the AITA. You would only drift into that territory if you had abandoned your parents entirely, left them without power or food, and refused to communicate. But you didn't. You stayed, you paid, you endured. The true AITA behavior came from Zora, not because she struggled, but because she exploited, deceived, and shifted blame. You preserved fairness, you upheld responsibility, and you resisted being consumed by someone else's chaos. That is strength, not selfishness. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments, and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out AITA for refusing to fund my cousin's honeymoon. Click here to watch it now.